The first sound wasn't the loudest, it was the wrongest. It was a flat, percussive pop that cut through the gentle, layered hum of the Northwood Elementary Library, a hum composed of the rustle of turning pages, the whisper of sneakers on linoleum, and the quiet, contented sighs of children lost in other worlds. It was a sound so alien in that sanctuary of quiet learning that it seemed to tear a hole in the fabric of the morning. Sarah Jenkins looked up, her finger frozen on the page of a dinosaur encyclopedia, its spine cracked and its corners softened by hundreds of small, eager hands. Across the low, polished oak table, 7-year-old Leo startled, a smear of blue crayon on his cheek. His wide, curious eyes lifted from a drawing of a stegosaurus whose proportions were heroically inaccurate. "What was that, Miss J?" he whispered, his voice a small thing in the suddenly vast silence that had swallowed the room's gentle hum. Behind him, near the tall, sunlit windows that looked out onto the sprawling playground, fourth grader Maria glanced up from her graphic novel, a nervous frown creasing her brow. Even Mr. Henderson, a nervous, first-time parent who had been lingering near the parenting section for 20 minutes, looked up from a book on childhood anxiety, his own mirroring the title's subject. Sarah's mind, a librarian's mind, trained to categorize and rationalize, cycled through a dozen possibilities. A car backfiring on the street, a heavy book dropped in the hallway, construction noise from the new gymnasium being built on the far side of the school grounds. But she knew with a cold, primal certainty that coiled in her stomach like a nesting snake that it was none of those things. This sound was deliberate. It was malicious. Before she could formulate a reassuring lie, a lie to calm Leo, to soothe Maria, to assuage the nervous parent, it came again. Pop, pop, closer this time. The sound was sharper, less muffled. It was followed by a noise that was far worse. A scream, thin and sharp, brutally cut short. Then the unmistakable, cacophonous crash of the cafeteria lunch trays hitting the floor, a sound of mass panic. Every molecule of air in the room seemed to freeze. The mundane Tuesday morning, smelling of old paper, floor wax, and the faint, sweet scent of the pink erasers the kindergartners were so fond of, shattered into a million terrifying pieces. Sarah, who had found her calling in this quiet, ordered world after a childhood of chaos and unpredictability, felt the walls of her own hard-won sanctuary begin to crumble. This library was more than her job. It was her haven. Her training, a half-forgotten active shooter drill from a sweltering professional development day, flickered in her mind. A PowerPoint slide with bold, red letters: run, hide, fight. The instructor, a retired cop with a weary face, had emphasized the order of operations. But how could she run? Her children, her kids, were here. They were scattered throughout the stacks, vulnerable and trusting. Her eyes met Maria's across the room, and in them, she saw a reflection of her own dawning terror. But she also saw the girl's terrified gaze fixed on her, waiting, expecting guidance. It was that look that galvanized her. "Leo," she said, her voice a low, steady anchor in the rising tide of fear. "I want you to crawl under my desk, right now, like a turtle going into its shell." She didn't wait for him to obey, but gave him a gentle push. To the other dozen children and the now paralyzed Mr. Henderson, she projected a librarian's calm, a voice honed for story time, now repurposed for survival. "Everyone to the back office, quietly. We're going to play the quiet game. The winner gets a sticker from the big shiny roll." It was a ridiculous, flimsy promise, but it was spoken with an authority born of desperation, and it worked. The terrified, searching eyes of her students locked onto her, their fear momentarily superseded by the familiar comfort of a teacher's instruction. They moved, a small herd of brightly colored sneakers and cartoon backpacks, their movements clumsy with fear. Mr. Henderson, shaken from his stupor, began ushering the nearest children toward the back. Maria, older and more aware, grabbed the hand of a sobbing first grader and pulled her along, her own fear sublimated into a fierce protectiveness. As the last child scurried inside the windowless storage room, the pops grew louder, closer, punctuated by the rhythmic, metallic banging on the main library doors. Not a fist. Something harder, something meant to break things. Sarah didn't hesitate. Her body, usually more at home with the gentle ache of shelving books than with acts of desperate strength, felt electric. "Mr. Henderson, keep them calm. Don't let them make a sound," she commanded, her voice firm. She shoved a heavy, wheeled cart of returned books against the office door, the wheels squealing in protest. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then she turned to the main entrance. The door handles were rattling violently, the metal groaning. She grabbed the heaviest, sturdiest thing she could find. a two-tiered oak bookshelf filled with dense, oversized biographies of historical figures. With a guttural grunt that tore at her throat, she heaved, adrenaline surging through her veins, a strange metallic taste flooding her mouth. It scraped across the linoleum, a deafening groaning sound, but it moved. She angled it, wedging it against the inward swinging doors, a desperate, pathetic barricade of wood and history against a tide of modern violence. A splintering crack echoed through the room as the small, wire-reinforced glass window in the door shattered. A hand, pale and thin, clad in a black tactical glove, reached through, fumbling for the lock mechanism. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, searching for a weapon, for anything. Her gaze landed on a cart loaded for reshelving. On top sat the Merriam-Webster's Unabridged Dictionary, a tome as thick as a cinder block, its blue cover worn from years of use by children searching for meaning. It was a preposterous weapon, a symbol of her quiet, ordered world of words and definitions. She grabbed it, its weight a solid, reassuring presence in her hands. The lock clicked. The doors swung inward a few inches, stopped by the bookshelf. A young man, barely older than the high school students she used to help with research papers, squeezed through the gap. He was pale, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. His eyes were vacant and unfocused, sweeping the room with a terrifying lack of recognition. He wore dark cargo pants and a black hoodie, and a semi-automatic rifle was held loosely in his hands, its black metal a stark and brutal intrusion against the colorful world of children's literature. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the back office, on the faint, muffled sound of a child's sob that had leaked through the door. In that split second, Sarah understood. He wasn't just a shooter, he was a hunter, and her flock, her children, were his target. The librarian, the woman who organized bake sales and mended torn pages with delicate tape, the woman who believed in the quiet power of stories, vanished. In her place stood something else. Something primal. "Hey!" she screamed, her voice raw and loud, a sound she didn't recognize as her own. It ripped through the tense silence, a challenge and a command. The gunman's head snapped towards her. His empty eyes tried to focus, to process this new variable that wasn't cowering or running. Sarah didn't give him the chance. She hurled the dictionary. It flew end over end, a clumsy, ridiculous projectile of paper and glue and knowledge. It struck him square in the chest with a heavy, satisfying thud that knocked the air from his lungs. He stumbled backward, his grip on the rifle faltering for a half-second as he gasped. It was all the time she needed. She charged, not with any plan, not with any thought for her own safety, but with the pure, animalistic impulse to put her body between the monster and the children. The first bullet felt like a sledgehammer hitting her shoulder. The impact was a physical shockwave, spinning her around and throwing her against a bookshelf filled with fairy tales. A hot, searing pain exploded through her, so intense it was almost a white light, and for a moment, she saw not the gunman, but a memory of her own chaotic childhood home, a place she had fought so hard to escape. She gasped, her vision tunneling. But through the narrowing aperture of her consciousness, she saw him raising the rifle again, his aim drifting back toward the office door, where she had just hidden a dozen tiny lives. No, not in my library. Pain was irrelevant. Survival was irrelevant. She pushed herself off the shelf, her left arm hanging uselessly, a dead weight that sent bolts of agony up her neck. She took another staggering step. The second shot hit her in the abdomen. It was a deep, sickening punch that stole her breath and buckled her knees. The world tilted sideways. She fell forward onto her hands, the rough texture of the industrial carpet scraping her palms. The sharp, metallic tang of cordite filled her nostrils, a smell she would never forget, mingling with the familiar scent of books. She looked up, her vision blurry with tears and pain. He was closer now, his face a mask of confusion and rage, as if he couldn't comprehend why she was still moving, why she was still between him and his goal. She had to keep his attention. She had to be the threat. Pushing through a wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her, she forced herself onto her knees, a supplicant in a ritual of violence she hadn't chosen. "Pop!" A fiery agony tore through her thigh. She cried out, a thin, reedy sound that was swallowed by the ringing in her ears. She was failing. He was going to get past her. With the last ounce of her strength, she lunged, not at him, but at his legs, a desperate, clumsy tackle. Her arms wrapped around his shins, her cheek pressing against the rough denim of his jeans. Her mind registered the absurdity of it she was holding on as if he were a tree in a hurricane. Pop, pop, two more explosions of pain, one in her side, one somewhere in her back. They barely registered as distinct events. Her world had dissolved into a universe of pure sensation. The rough denim, the cold linoleum on her cheek, the deafening roar in her ears. Her brain was screaming commands that her body could no longer obey. Her grip loosened. Her strength, her very life force, was draining out of her onto the library floor, staining the carpet a dark, ugly crimson. Her last conscious thought was not of pain or of fear for herself. It was a single, crystal-clear image. Maria's face, looking up from her book, and Leo's, looking up from his drawing of a dinosaur, both of them trusting her in this quiet, safe space to keep them from harm. The world went dark, the distant, rising wail of sirens the only sound accompanying her descent into the abyss. Waking up was a slow, painful crawl out of a deep, dark well. The first thing Sarah became aware of was a sound, a soft, rhythmic beeping that seemed to be coming from inside her own head, a metronome for her suffering. The second was pain. It was a vast, sprawling entity, a landscape of agony with sharp volcanic peaks in her shoulder and abdomen, and a dull, throbbing continent that encompassed the rest of her body. Every breath was a shallow, guarded affair, a negotiation with her own screaming nerve endings. She forced her eyelids open. They felt heavy, glued shut with sand and exhaustion. The world swam into view, a blurry watercolor of white ceilings and pale green walls. The beeping was a machine beside her bed, its little screen tracing the frantic, unsteady rhythm of her heart. An IV tube was taped to the back of her hand, snaking up to a bag of clear liquid. The sterile, antiseptic smell of a hospital filled her lungs, a smell she now associated with survival. A man in blue scrubs leaned into her field of vision. He had a kind, tired face, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of countless long nights. His name tag read Dr. Ramirez. "Miss Jenkins, Sarah, welcome back," he said, his voice gentle but weary. "You're in the ICU at St. Mary's General. You've been through a lot." "The children?" she rasped, her throat feeling like it was lined with sandpaper. The words came out as a broken croak, each one an effort that sent a sympathetic twinge through her stitched abdomen. Dr. Ramirez's tired face broke into a genuine, relieved smile. "All safe. Every single one. The parent who was with you, Mr. Henderson, is being hailed as a hero, too. He kept them all quiet until the police arrived. But he told everyone. He said you were the reason they're alive. They're calling you a hero, Sarah, and for once, the news isn't exaggerating." He pulled a stool closer to her bed. "I'm not going to lie to you. It was bad. You were shot 5 times. We removed 3 bullets in a 6-hour surgery. 2 are still in there, lodged too close to your spine and a major artery. It's safer to leave them for now. You have a punctured lung, a lacerated kidney, and more stitches than a patchwork quilt. You are, by any medical definition, lucky to be alive. You are also, by any human definition, a hero." The word felt strange, ill-fitting. Heroes were in the epic fantasies she loaned out, not the people who stamped them. She was just a librarian. The memories came flooding back in a chaotic, terrifying rush. The sound, the screams, the empty eyes of the gunman, the blinding pain. A violent shudder racked her body, and the machine beside her beeped faster, its alarm a shrill cry. "Easy, easy," Dr. Ramirez said, his hand resting reassuringly on her uninjured arm. "It's over. You're safe now." Over the next 2 days, the fog of anesthesia and trauma began to lift. A hospital psychiatrist came to speak with her, a gentle woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. Sarah found herself talking, the words spilling out in a torrent of pain and confusion. She talked about the guilt, the irrational feeling that she could have done more. What if I hadn't been fast enough? What if he'd gotten past me? "Doctor." Sharma just listened, assuring her these feelings were normal, a product of a mind trying to make sense of the senseless. The physical recovery was a landscape of small humiliations and agonizing victories. A young, relentlessly cheerful physical therapist named Marco had her trying to sit up, a movement that felt like being torn in half. He celebrated when she managed to dangle her legs over the side of the bed for 30 seconds. It was a brutal reminder of how broken her body was. But as her personal world was one of pain and struggle, the outside world was building her a pedestal. The flowers arrived first, so many that they filled her room and had to be placed in the hallway, a river of roses, carnations, and lilies from strangers across the country. Then came the cards and letters. A nurse with a bright, cheerful demeanor would sit and read them to her. They were from the children she'd saved, filled with crayon drawings of her as a superhero with a cape made of books, and from their parents, filled with raw, desperate gratitude that was almost painful to hear. Detective Miller came to see her again. "Local PD, ma'am," he said, removing his hat as he entered. "Just need a preliminary statement if you're up to it, and to say thank you. My own granddaughter is in 3rd grade at Northwood. She was in the gymnasium when it happened." His voice cracked on the last word, a testament to the horror that had gripped their entire town. Sarah told him everything she could remember. He listened patiently, taking sparse notes in a small, worn notebook. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "You threw a dictionary at him," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Then you charged him. Unbelievable." He confirmed the gunman was dead. Then he leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "The whole thing stinks, Miss Jenkins. The feds are treating the school like Area 51. My guys are being told to stand down. They've taken all the evidence, all the files. I've never seen anything like it. This isn't procedure, this is a lockdown. They're not sharing a damn thing, not even the shooter's name. There's a story here they don't want getting out." One afternoon, Leo's mother, Mrs. Gable, came to visit. The woman stood by the bedside, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She just held Sarah's hand and cried, repeating the words, "Thank you," over and over like a prayer. "He has nightmares," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He wakes up screaming sometimes. But he's alive to have them. He's alive because of you. He just keeps drawing pictures of Super Miss J. He says you're stronger than the Hulk." She handed Sarah a folded piece of construction paper. On it was a crayon drawing of Sarah, with giant muscles and a book in her hand, standing over a vanquished stick figure monster. It was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. After 4 grueling days, she was discharged. Leaving the hospital felt like stepping onto another planet. Photographers and news vans were camped out by the entrance, their long camera lenses like the snouts of hungry animals. She was shuttled out a back exit into a waiting car, her body a symphony of aches and sharp, stabbing pains with every bump in the road. Her small rental house, a blue bungalow on a quiet, tree-lined street, was transformed. The lawn was a forest of hand-painted signs. "Thank you, Miss J. Northwood's hero lives here. Our angel librarian." Yellow ribbons were tied around the old oak tree in her front yard. She felt a lump form in her throat. This was her community. This was what she had fought for. That night, she slept in her own bed for the first time, a fitful, pain-riddled sleep haunted by the ghost of gunfire. But when she woke, it was to the gentle morning light filtering through her curtains. The house was quiet. The world was at peace. She was home. She was a hero. She limped into the kitchen, her body protesting every step, and put on a pot of coffee. The familiar ritual was comforting. As the rich aroma began to fill the small space, a sharp, authoritative knock rattled her front door. Not a neighborly tap. This was a summons. She peered through the peephole, her heart giving a nervous flutter. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stood on her porch, his expression impassive, an earpiece coiled discreetly into his ear. Beyond him, parked on the curb in front of the cheerful, handmade signs, were 2 black SUVs, silent and menacing as sharks. Their tinted windows reflected the sunny street, distorting it into something dark and unrecognizable. Another man in a suit stood by the lead vehicle, his gaze sweeping the street with an unnerving professional vigilance. They didn't belong here. They were an invasion, a violation of the quiet peace she had bled for. The knock came again, harder this time. Rap, rap, rap. A cold dread, colder and sharper than the fear she'd felt in the library, seeped into her bones, chilling her more than any winter morning. The world that had just finished celebrating her had now, it seemed, come to collect. Sarah opened the door, her hand trembling on the knob. The man on the porch did not smile. His eyes were like chips of granite, cold and assessing. He held up a black leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming gold badge nestled against a stark blue background. "Sarah Jenkins?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth or inflection, the voice of a man who dealt in facts, not feelings. "Agent Thompson, United States Secret Service. We need to have a word." Behind him, a second agent, a woman with severe, pulled-back hair and the same stony expression, got out of the lead SUV and walked silently up the path. She moved with an unnerving economy of motion, her presence sucking the very air out of the cheerful morning. "Secret Service?" Sarah's voice was thin, confused. I don't understand. Detective Miller said the FBI was handling things." Jurisdiction has been reassigned due to emergent national security concerns, Thompson said curtly, his eyes scanning the inside of her house over her shoulder. May we come in? Again, it wasn't a request. He stepped over the threshold before she could answer, the woman, who he introduced as Agent Cross, following close behind. They closed the door behind them, and the solid click of the latch sounded like a cell door locking. They didn't sit on the couch she gestured to. They stood in the middle of her small living room, turning it into an interrogation chamber. The colorful afghan her grandmother had knitted, draped over the armchair, seemed frivolous and out of place. The stack of books on her coffee table felt like clutter in their sterile presence. We've reviewed the preliminary report from the local police, Thompson began, his gaze cold and analytical. He wasn't looking at her as a person, let alone a hero. He was looking at a problem to be solved, a loose thread to be snipped. There are some inconsistencies we need to address. Let's start with your decision to engage the assailant. Engage him? Sarah repeated, the word tasting like ash. I was trying to protect the children. That is your interpretation, Thompson countered smoothly. The protocol for a civilian in an active shooter situation is to evade and shelter. You did the opposite. You barricaded the door, drawing attention to your location. Then you initiated contact by throwing an object at the assailant. Is that correct? The words initiated contact were so clinical, so detached from the blinding terror of the moment, that Sarah felt a dizzying sense of unreality. He was going after the kids. I had to do something. What you had to do, Miss Jenkins, was follow protocol, Thompson said, his voice taking on a sharp, condescending edge. He pulled a thin file from his jacket. I have your personnel file from the school district. It says here you were disciplined once, in 2022, for letting a student from a low-income family take home a reference book over the weekend because he didn't have internet access for his project. You have a history of bending rules when you feel it's justified, don't you? The accusation was so bizarre, so twisted, it left her speechless. He was using an act of compassion as evidence of a character flaw. You introduced a chaotic variable into a volatile situation, he continued, pressing his advantage. Your actions were unpredictable. You escalated the situation. A hot surge of anger, powerful enough to momentarily eclipse her pain, rose in Sarah's chest. Escalated? He came into a school with a rifle. I was trying to stop him from murdering children. The situation was being monitored, Agent Cross interjected, her first time speaking. Her voice was even colder than Thompson's. Your intervention prevented trained personnel from containing the subject according to established procedures. Monitored? What are you talking about? There was no one there. It was just me. Sarah's voice rose, bordering on hysterical. That information is classified, Thompson said, cutting her off. He took a step closer, his presence looming and oppressive. What isn't classified is that your actions, while garnering significant media attention, were, from a tactical standpoint, reckless. You are not a hero, Miss Jenkins. You are a civilian element who interfered in a federal security matter. The cruelty of the statement was breathtaking. The interrogation went on for nearly 2 hours. Every split-second decision she made under unimaginable duress was picked apart, twisted, and reframed as a mistake. He was trying to break her, to make her doubt the one pure, good thing she had ever done. Finally, he produced a slim file folder and placed it on her coffee table. This is the official federal summary of the incident. It states that the assailant, a known troubled individual, breached the school perimeter and that his actions were contained by law enforcement. It states that you were a civilian casualty, injured during the containment process. We need you to sign it, attesting to its accuracy. Sarah stared at the papers. It was a lie. A neat, tidy, bureaucratic lie that erased her. No, she whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of pain and fury. I won't sign that. Thompson's eyes narrowed. This is not a negotiation, Miss Jenkins. This is a matter of national security. When she refused again, his demeanor shifted. Very well. Pursuant to Section 2703 of the Stored Communications Act and the ongoing federal investigation, we are confiscating all your personal electronic devices. Agent Cross was already moving, placing Sarah's laptop and cell phone into silver evidence bags. You can't do that. You don't have a warrant. We have jurisdiction, Thompson said simply. Furthermore, you are now under a federal gag order. You will not speak about the details of this incident with anyone. Any attempt to do so will be considered obstruction of a federal investigation, a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Do you understand? She was too stunned to speak. He took her silence as assent, We will have a protective detail stationed outside your residence 24/7 to ensure your safety and your compliance," he said, the veiled threat hanging heavy in the air. "We will be back tomorrow for your signature." And then they were gone. The next day, it was Agent Cross who came to the door alone. She brought a coffee and adopted a look of strained sympathy. "Look, Sarah," she began, using her first name in a transparent attempt at intimacy. "Agent Thompson can be abrasive. He's results-oriented. But we're on your side. We just need to control the narrative. For everyone's safety." The young man, the shooter, he was deeply unwell. He was a victim too, in his own way. We have information suggesting he was radicalized online, that he himself was being manipulated. Releasing all the chaotic details of the event could inspire copycats, put more children at risk. Surely you don't want that? This was somehow worse than Thompson's open hostility. The insidious gaslighting, the suggestion that she should feel sympathy for the boy who shot her 5 times, was profoundly violating. "We know you were in shock," Cross continued, her voice a soft, persuasive murmur. "Memory is a fragile thing after a trauma like that. Are you absolutely certain you remember everything exactly as it happened? All we're asking is that you attest to a version of events that doesn't cause a public panic." "I remember him trying to murder children," Sarah said, her voice like ice. "And I remember stopping him. That's a memory I'm very clear on." Cross's sympathetic mask vanished, replaced by a look of cold disappointment. "You're making a mistake," she said before leaving. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The physical pain was a constant, but the psychological torment was worse. Her house, once her sanctuary, felt like a cage. She would watch the agents change shifts with military precision, never a word exchanged. They were silent, watchful statues of federal authority. At night, she would see the glow of a cigarette in the dark car, a single, watchful orange eye. She began to feel paranoid. Was the house bugged? She started running the faucet when she talked to herself. On the 4th day, Thompson returned. He didn't come inside. He just stood on her porch. "Just wanted to let you know," he said casually, "we're required to notify other federal agencies of ongoing investigations. It would be a shame if, say, the Department of Education were to begin a review of your teaching license based on your unpredictable behavior. Or if the IRS decided your past tax returns needed a random but very thorough audit. Systems are all interconnected these days. It's a complicated world." He didn't threaten her directly. He didn't have to. He was showing her the 1,000 invisible ways the system could crush her. She turned on the television, desperate for a connection to the world, only to find the narrative being actively manipulated. A cable news anchor, reading from a teleprompter, reported, "New details are emerging from the Northwood incident, with federal sources now indicating the lone assailant was a deeply troubled individual known to authorities, and that a rapid federal response successfully prevented further tragedy." They showed a picture of the school, then one of Senator Marcus Davenport giving a press conference about school safety, his face a mask of solemn concern. Her role had been completely written out of the story. It was the most profound loneliness she had ever experienced. They were not just erasing her, they were overwriting her with a more convenient fiction, and she was utterly powerless to stop them. Fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach. It was a rational fear, the fear of a single, wounded individual up against the full, faceless might of the United States government. For days she did nothing. She healed, she read, she stared out the window. She considered giving in. What was the truth worth if it cost her everything? Her career, her freedom, her peace. Maybe signing the paper was the only sane thing to do. She even wrote a practice signature on a piece of paper, her hand shaking. Then she looked at the drawing from Leo, which she had taped to her refrigerator door. Super Miss J. She ripped the paper with her signature to shreds and burned it in her kitchen sink. The anger returned, colder and harder this time, forged into resolve. They had underestimated her. They saw a quiet librarian, a soft-spoken woman who organized books and shushed noisy children. They didn't see the person who had charged a gunman to save children. They had wounded her, but they hadn't broken her. A librarian's greatest strength wasn't silence. It was resourcefulness. It was knowing how to find information, how to connect disparate facts to form a larger truth. And her mind was her library, a place they couldn't search, a sanctuary they couldn't violate. On the 3rd night of her confinement, a memory sparked in the darkness. Years ago, after a nasty lightning storm had fried her modem, She had bought a cheap Android tablet as a backup. She'd used it for a month, found its interface slow and clunky, and eventually tossed it in a storage box in the attic. It wasn't on any inventory. They didn't know it existed. Moving was agony. Every step up the rickety attic ladder sent daggers of pain through her side and thigh. She moved slowly, in the dead of night, biting her lip to keep from crying out, motivated by a desperate burning hope. The attic was hot and stuffy, smelling of dust and old memories. As she was rummaging through a box, a floorboard creaked loudly below her. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Outside, she heard the crunch of gravel as the guard on duty did a walk-around of the house. A beam from his flashlight cut through the attic's small circular window, sweeping across the dusty rafters just feet from where she was hiding. She held her breath, flattening herself behind a stack of old suitcases, until the footsteps faded away. Shaken, she found the box tucked behind a set of old Christmas decorations. Inside, beneath a tangle of old chargers and user manuals, was the tablet. She carried it downstairs like a holy relic. Her hands shook as she found a compatible charger and plugged it in. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, the screen flickered to life, its boot-up chime sounding as loud as a gunshot in the silent house. The battery was dead, but the machine itself was alive. It was a lifeline. She waited until after 2 a.m., when the world was at its quietest. Huddled in her laundry room, the furthest point from the street, she powered it on. The Wi-Fi icon blinked, searching. A list of networks appeared. Most were secured, but one, belonging to her neighbor, 3 houses down, an elderly man who was notoriously bad with technology, was open. Linksys? Guessed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clicked it. Connected. She was through the wall. Her first act was to create a new, anonymous email address. librarian.witness7@protonmail.com. Her fingers, clumsy from disuse and pain, flew across the virtual keyboard. Her first email was to Detective Miller, sent to his personal, non-departmental email address she'd found in an old community newsletter online. Subject: Northwood Elementary. They are silencing me. Detective Miller, this is Sarah Jenkins. I'm writing this on a hidden device. Federal agents have confiscated my property and placed me under a gag order. The story they are building is a lie. They are covering something up. I need to know who the shooter was. They won't release his name. That has to be the key. Please be careful. She hit send. The response came just before dawn. Subject: Northwood Elementary. They are silencing me. Miss Jenkins, I was afraid of something like this. The whole thing stinks. Do not reply to this email again from the same location twice if you can help it. Be careful about digital forensics. They can track anything. I will look into it. Stay safe. M. His warning about digital forensics sent a chill down her spine. She started moving the tablet around the house, using it in different rooms for short periods. A paranoid, desperate attempt to vary the signal's origin point. Her next move was riskier. She needed someone outside the system. She remembered a name from an article a friend had shared: Alicia Wu, an independent investigative journalist with a reputation for breaking stories the mainstream media was too afraid to touch. She ran a lean, subscriber-funded website called The Unvarnished Truth. She sent her first cryptic message. 2 days passed. The silence was deafening. Thompson visited again, his face a mask of smug impatience. He pushed the falsified report at her. Sign it, Miss Jenkins. This is your last chance to cooperate. She refused. That night, an email from Detective Miller appeared in her inbox. They've scrubbed him. It's like he never existed. No driver's license, no social media, no credit cards. A ghost. But ghosts leave traces. I'm working a source at the county morgue. It's slow. Just as this message instilled a new sense of dread, another email arrived. It was from Alicia Wu. Subject: Eyewitness to a cover-up. Northwood. Lots of people claim to be eyewitnesses. Prove you're the real one. Tell me something that wasn't in the news. Sarah's mind raced. What detail was uniquely hers? She typed her reply. I threw the Merriam-Webster's Unabridged Dictionary at him. The big blue one from the reference section. It hit him in the chest. 5 minutes later, a new message from Wu. Interesting. Still not enough. What was the name of the parent in the library with you? The media never got his name. Sarah's heart pounded. She remembered. Mr. Henderson. She typed it and sent it. The reply was almost instantaneous. I'm interested. Tell me everything. And be quick about it. The final piece fell into place the next night. An email from Miller. Sent at 3 a.m. Got it. My source pulled the toe tag photo, ran it through a private facial recognition database. His name is Jonathan Davenport, son of Senator Marcus Davenport. Sarah stared at the screen, the world tilting on its axis. Senator Davenport, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, one of the most powerful, ruthless men in Washington. Suddenly, everything made a horrible, perfect sense. The speed of the federal response, the Secret Service involvement, the lies, the gag order. This wasn't about national security. It was about a powerful father burying his son's horrific crime to save his career. She began to type, huddled over the small, glowing screen in the dead of night. She wasn't just writing an email. She was crafting a weapon. She typed for hours, reliving every terrifying moment, every condescending word from Thompson, every manipulative phrase from Cross. It was her testimony, her truth, her last stand. The discovery came at dawn on the 8th day. Sarah had spent the entire night typing, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a burning sense of purpose. Huddled in the bathroom, the tablet screen illuminating her pale, determined face, she poured her entire story into a single, detailed document. She wrote about the sounds, the smells, the terror in the children's eyes. She documented Thompson's interrogation, his exact words, his threats to her career and finances. She wrote about Agent Cross's insidious psychological manipulation, and she ended it with the truth she had received from Detective Miller. The gunman was Jonathan Davenport, son of Senator Marcus Davenport. This is a cover-up. She had just finished, her fingers aching and her body screaming with fatigue, when she heard a new sound from outside. Not the usual crunch of gravel from the agent's boots, but the low, electronic hum of a different kind of engine. She risked a peek through the blinds. A white van with no markings was parked behind the SUVs. A man in a technician's uniform was getting out, carrying a small directional antenna attached to a handheld device. They weren't just watching her anymore. They were sweeping for signals. Her time was up. Her first instinct was to panic, to smash the tablet and destroy the evidence. But her librarian's mind, the part of her that believed in the preservation of knowledge, of truth, took over. She had to get the story out. This was her only chance. A sharp, metallic rap on her door, harder and more urgent than ever before, jolted her. Before she could stand, the lock on her front door clicked. They had a key and the door swung open. Agent Thompson stormed in, flanked by two other agents she'd never seen before. His professional veneer was gone, replaced by a mask of cold, undisguised fury. He was holding a small black device with a single blinking antenna, the receiver for the sweep equipment. It was pointed at the back of her house. "You stupid, arrogant woman," he hissed, the words slicing through the morning quiet. "Did you really think we wouldn't find it? Did you think you could outsmart us?" His eyes scanned the room, predatory and wild. "Where is it? The tablet? The phone? Whatever it is you've been using." Sarah's blood ran cold. The tablet was in the bathroom, still warm from her hours of typing. But it didn't matter. They knew. The invisible thread connecting her to the outside world had been discovered. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling despite her best effort to keep it steady. Before he could respond, she decided to fight back with the only weapons she had left. His own words. "Is this part of your established procedure, Agent Thompson? Or are you the chaotic variable now?" For a second, he was taken aback. His eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me!" he roared, recovering. "We have logs. Encrypted traffic coming from this location for 3 nights. Who have you been talking to?" "Huh? Some local news hack? That washed-up detective?" He leaned in closer, his voice a low, menacing snarl. "You have no idea the trouble you are in. You think this is about a school shooting? You have stumbled into a matter of state security. The people you are angering can crush you without a second thought. They can bury you in a federal prison for espionage so deep your own mother won't be able to find you." The threat was real, terrifyingly real. But in that moment of terror, her desperate, wild plan solidified. It was a librarian's bluff against a man who held all the cards. She let her shoulders slump. She let a tear trace a path down her cheek. She let her expression crumble into one of utter defeat. "Okay," she whispered, the word broken. "You're right. I'm sorry, I was scared. I'll sign the papers. I'll sign whatever you want." Thompson stared at her, searching her face for deceit. He saw only what he wanted to see. A weak, broken civilian who had finally understood her place. A slow, triumphant smirk spread across his lips. I knew you'd see reason, he said, straightening his tie. He nodded to the other agents. Find the device. We'll wipe it and log it as evidence. To Sarah, he said, get your coat. You're coming with us. You'll sign your statement at a secure facility. Just, please, Sarah begged, putting every ounce of pathetic pleading she could muster into her voice. Can I just use the bathroom first? Please. My medication. It makes me feel sick. Thompson hesitated, then gave a dismissive wave. Fine. 2 minutes. Agent Cross, go with her. Wait outside the door. Agent Cross followed Sarah down the short hallway, her expression unreadable. Sarah's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Every step was a prayer. She entered the small bathroom and locked the door. Don't take long, Cross's voice called from the other side. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely function. She lifted the heavy ceramic lid off the toilet tank. There, nestled in a waterproof bag, was her tablet. She powered it on, her breath catching in her throat as the screen lit up. The Wi-Fi connected instantly. Her fingers flew, opening her email client, composing a new message to Alicia Wu. Subject: everything. Publish now. She attached the document. Her thumb hovered over the send icon. The file was large, full of her detailed testimony. She could hear the agents starting to search the living room, the sound of drawers being opened and shut. Jenkins, time's up, Cross called from outside the door. A sharp rap followed. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut and hit send. A small progress bar appeared on the screen. 10%. 20%. It was moving so slowly. The neighbor's Wi-Fi signal seemed to be flickering. Pound, pound. Open this door now. 30%. 40%. She could hear Thompson yelling in the other room. Check the attic. Rip the place apart if you have to. 50%. 60%. The progress bar seemed to hang, mocking her. The doorknob rattled violently. A heavy thud slammed against the wood as a shoulder hit it from the other side. The frame groaned. 70%. 80%. 99%. It stopped. Frozen. Just 1% from freedom. The doorframe splintered with a sickening crack. Message sent. The words flashed on the screen just as the door burst open. Agent Cross stood there, her gun drawn. Thompson shoved past her, his face a mask of purple rage when he saw the tablet in her hands. He lunged and ripped it from her grasp, his fingers digging into her wounded shoulder. Sarah cried out in pain as he smashed the device against the bathroom sink again and again. The screen spiderwebbed, went black, and the plastic casing cracked, spilling its electronic guts. You're finished, he spat, his face inches from hers, his breath hot with rage. You have no idea what you've just done. But as he dragged her out of the ruined bathroom, Sarah looked at his furious, panicked face and knew he was wrong. He was the one who had no idea. The truth was out. The signal had gone through. It was no longer her secret to carry. It was the world's. The story broke like a dam. Alicia Wu, sitting in her small, cluttered home office 1,000 miles away, saw the email arrive. She read Sarah's harrowing, detailed account, her journalistic instincts screaming. This was it. The story of the year. She fact-checked the one verifiable detail she could: the shooter's identity through a confidential source in the Justice Department. The source replied in minutes with a single, coded word: bingo. Alicia didn't hesitate. She wrote a short, explosive introduction, embedded Sarah's entire unedited testimony, and published it under a stark, unmissable headline. Exclusive. Wounded school hero gagged by Secret Service and Senator Davenport cover-up. Her full, uncensored story. The internet ignited. At first, it was a spark on social media, then a brushfire, then a raging inferno. On her website's analytics page, Alicia watched the traffic spike from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of concurrent readers. Her server crashed. She got it back online, it crashed again. Number Justice for Sarah Jenkins became the #1 trending topic worldwide in under an hour. In Sarah's neighborhood, Leo's mother saw a link on a parenting forum. She read it, her hand flying to her mouth. She immediately started a neighborhood text chain. You won't believe what they did to her. Read this. In his precinct, Detective Miller got a call from his captain. What the hell did you do, Miller? The captain yelled, though there was a note of grudging respect in his voice. My phone's blowing up. The mayor, the governor's office, they've all seen it. The dam of carefully constructed lies crumbled into dust. By noon, the first news vans arrived on Sarah's street. By 3 o'clock, they were joined by dozens of ordinary people, parents from the school, neighbors, outraged citizens who had driven from neighboring towns. They formed a human shield around her small blue house, their signs a direct rebuke to the black SUVs. They chanted her name. The White House press briefing was a bloodbath. The press secretary, blindsided, could only repeat, "I don't have any information on that at this time," as reporters, smelling blood, shouted questions about Senator Davenport and the Secret Service. Faced with a public relations nightmare of catastrophic proportions, the system blinked. Late in the afternoon, a quiet order came down from on high. The black SUVs started their engines and, one by one, pulled away from the curb, slinking away in disgrace under the jeers of the gathered crowd. The siege was over. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Senator Marcus Davenport's career was incinerated in the firestorm of public outrage. He resigned from his committee positions, then from the Senate entirely, disappearing under the weight of a dozen different investigations into obstruction of justice and abuse of power. Agent Thompson was suspended indefinitely, a scapegoat for a system that had been caught in the act. The victory, however, was not without its cost. Sarah's quiet life was gone, replaced by the glare of the media spotlight. She gave one, and only one, interview to Alicia Wu. After that, she refused all others, asking only for her privacy. Her body was a roadmap of scars, a constant reminder of the violence she had endured. Some nights, she still woke up to the phantom sound of gunfire, her hand reaching for a dictionary that wasn't there. She was no longer just a librarian. She was a symbol. The story ends a month later. The autumn leaves are turning brilliant shades of red and gold. Sarah is sitting on her front porch swing, a book open but unread in her lap. The national news crews are gone, replaced by the comfortable quiet of her neighborhood. Her yard is no longer a prison but a garden, filled with newly planted flower beds, gifts from the community. A group of children, their laughter bright and loud, ride by on their bicycles. "Hi, Miss J," one of them shouts. "It's Leo." Beside him, Maria gives a shy wave. Leo circles back, his bike skidding to a stop on her lawn. "My mom says you're famous," he says, his expression serious. "Not really," Sarah replies softly. "I'm just a librarian." He points to the faint scar visible on her arm. "Does it still hurt?" Sarah looks at the scar, then back at his innocent, curious face. "Sometimes," she says honestly. "But it's a reminder that we have to be brave, even when we're scared." He seems to consider this with the profound seriousness of a 7-year-old. Then he smiles. "Okay, see ya." He pedals off to join his friends, their laughter fading down the street. Sarah watches them go, a real, genuine smile touching her lips. As she settles back into the swing, a sharp, familiar pain lances through her side, a permanent echo of that terrible morning. It's a painful smile, a difficult one. But it's a victorious one. She had lost her quiet life, her privacy, her health. But she had protected her children, and she had reclaimed the truth. And in the quiet hum of an ordinary afternoon, surrounded by the community she had fought for, she knew, with every fiber of her being, that it had been worth the cost.